Hello and welcome. I'm Professor Steve Miller. Today we'll have another episode of our MAE speaker series, Industry Insights from Gator Grads. Today we are joined by MAE alumni Bill Roto Reuter. Roto grew up in Key West, Florida, and graduated from the University of Florida in 1984, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering, and he was commissioned through the ROTC program. Roto dreamed of flying into space, and growing up, he witnessed the Apollo 11 moonshots. He became a Navy strike fighter pilot and chief test pilot, commanding the U.S. Navy's largest test squadron. He had several assignments across the Navy, deploying on several of our nation's aircraft carriers. He currently serves as founder and president of R Squared LLC, a consulting firm that specializes in leadership and executive coaching. Previously, Roto served in the U.S. Navy for 28 years, ending his illustrious military career as commanding officer for the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division. In addition, Roto has over 3,000 hours of flight time in 35 different aircraft. This is very impressive. Roto is very committed today to serving the Central Florida community and is involved in a variety of organizations which focus on the community's growth, veterans' well-being, and support of the Navy. Notably, he serves on the board of directors for the Orlando Regional Chamber of Commerce and is a 2018 inductee into the Florida Veterans Hall of Fame. We are very delighted here at the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the University of Florida to have Captain Roto here with us today to discuss his experiences in aerospace engineering, a field which we are all passionate about, and look at his insights as an executive and respected military leader in our community. We at the Department of MAE welcome Captain Roto. I'm happy to introduce him. Take it away, sir.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Miller. Appreciate the great introduction. I am so excited to be here. Some of you may have been at the MAE Awards Banquet last year where we did get to do it live, and what a great time that was. And I got to give a quick 10-minute passionate play on leadership. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how you operationalize your Gator education and through developing the leader within you, like you saw on the flyer. I'm a student of leadership. Now I teach and coach it. But I want to talk about this photo on it. Every photo that you're going to see in here has a quick story around it. So that is my little noggin right up there in the cockpit, alone and unafraid, as we used to say. And you see all this orange stuff and these weapons coming off. These are not live weapons. These are inert weapons. And we're doing a weapons separation test from this. This is 60 degree, right at Mach 1. And this thing right here, this orange thing, is the advanced targeting FLIR shape that we were putting on the aircraft. And we were testing to make sure that the bombs would come off safely and not either hit each other or hit that. But right at Mach 1 over the nice and humid Chesapeake Bay, you can see great vapes. And Flight Test is a great place to get pictures of yourself flying because it's all data and we're all geeks and we all want to make sure that we capture all of that. On the wingtips, you see cameras that are there. Those cameras are doing 600 frames a second. Okay, they are doing a phenomenal resolution all around the jet to capture these things pickling off the airplane. So that's the story behind that one. So then when we get out of the University of Florida and when I graduated, it was like, okay, the world's my oyster. Here we go. And of course, I was going into the Navy. And then I was going to start flying airplanes. And so I wanted to be an astronaut, and that was my background. I grew up in a trailer park in Key West, and, I was just ignorant enough to say, I may be able to go do that. So it was kind of that approach and very passionate about trying to chase that dream. I was a finalist for NASA 3 times. I've got buddies that are there still today, and including Doug Hurley, who just launched up in the Dragon capsule just a few short weeks ago, and really proud of him and his efforts. So when you look at this picture, here's the story. So there's something going on here thermodynamically that's not something you would see anywhere near land. This is about 150 miles off the coast of Virginia, and it is in winter. The air temperature outside is 45 degrees. The water temperature is 73 degrees. and there's not a cloud in the sky, and it is snowing on the flight deck. This is an aircraft, this is an FA-18 Super Hornet. It is about ready to land on the flight deck. And what you see here is a snow engine that was created based on the fact that there was such a inversion and a difference between the water temperature and the air temperature. So snowflakes on the flight deck, not a cloud in the sky. Pretty cool stuff. But when you start here, and this is really what we're going to talk mostly about, this is an opportunity for you to either continue or start your discovery of yourself, your discovery of how leadership works, and how you fit into an organization that you're going to go be part of, whether that is in the defense industry, whether that is in another engineering firm that's doing something else in solar or anywhere. There are so many opportunities for aeromechanical engineers right now, and you're going to be able to the world really is your oyster when it comes to that. So what I want to share is what it takes. You know, in the Navy, we have a sea bag, right? We have all these things that are in our sea bag. And what I'm trying to help you understand today is coach you a little bit on what needs to go in the rest of your sea bag beyond what you had in the degree, beyond the eigenvalues and eigenvectors and all the other kinds of things that go into your Gator education. And so you've had some exposure to that, some more than others, but we're going to go through a process where I expose you to some other things that you might find valuable as you continue to mature your not only employability, but maturity and emotional intelligence and all of those other things that go along with actually being a good team member and eventually a team leader. So another story, another picture. So, and I promise I won't bore you with them, but there's something wrong with this aircraft. As you can see, I'm the guy in the front, and the story about the guy in the back is that it was his first flight in an FA-18. And so he really couldn't help this emergency that we had. And I will tell you that there was no gas left in the airplane to go around. So we had to land this time. You see the tail hook on the back. You see it's got to catch this cable right here along here. And you have to do that because you have no landing gear right here. So we have 2 out of 3. So no landing gear right here. So this wingtip is going to fall and it's going to hit the runway, and you have to have landed the airplane in just the right spot to make sure that the tail hook catches the wire to stop you, or you will literally tumble off of the runway. Or you can't land too early because this wingtip will catch that wire and you'll tumble again off the runway. So you had a small window to land the airplane, but you land the airplane in a way that puts the tail hook on the wire and allows this to drop to the ground once you're under the security of this tail hook and this wire slowing you down to a stop. So videos of that I have, but that's not for this particular presentation. It's a pretty wild experience, and glad to have walked away from it. But I say this and I illustrate this with, right now you do have a lot of landing gear, and with respect to your technical side, okay, you have a good baseline. You have a very good foundation. We're going to build on that foundation with what it means to actually be able to take what you know and to be able to translate it and connect it to people that are not with your background, because that's what's going to be crucial to you being able to succeed. It's easy to talk to folks that have the same level of education that you do in the same place that you did. That's an easy crosstalk. But boy, when you're trying to talk to somebody in program management or somebody in contracts or somebody in architecture, there's all kinds of different things that you need to be able to translate into different languages. We're going to talk about leadership, and that leadership is really going to be one of those, developing leaders is one of those catalysts for being able to do that and really being able to be more divergent in what you have in your sea bag. Okay, so a leader really is somebody who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So everybody said, you know, I get the chance to interview every year the candidates for the Naval Academy for Senator Marco Rubio. And we talk about leadership in those interviews all the time, because we get people that come in with fantastic academic prowess and great SAT and ACT scores, and they were valedictorian of their class, all of this sort of stuff. But when we talk to them about other things that have to do with servant leadership and the unselfishness of which they navigate their opportunity to be responsible for people, that's where it really starts to show the value in that whole person. And that's what we're going to talk more about. That's not leadership. Okay. If anybody tells you that's leadership, then they're wrong. Okay. And just to let you know that I am I'm an equal opportunity briefer. That's not leadership either. Okay. So if you have to tell somebody you are their leader, then you're not their leader because they follow you for reasons, hopefully, that are not just about you being the boss. Okay. So those are a couple of cute illustrations just to kind of, run through your head here that even if somebody's treating you that way, you'll have the ability and hopefully the patience to relax and recognize, okay, this person isn't necessarily leading the way that is most effective. And you will find ways, and there's some books on this that are awesome, to lead up and actually to be able to navigate those headwinds when they come up. Because when you're the new guy or gal in the company, you're often going to be frustrated, perhaps how you're treated by people that, one, may see you as a threat, and two, just haven't really grown through the process of developing as leaders. So I'm going to talk about building. This is kind of a building block here. So we're going to talk a little bit about knowing yourself first. We always talk about leadership. We say you need to lead yourself first. And often that's the hardest person to lead, right? That involves you being able to understand your blind spots, meaning things that you do and behaviors you have and interpretations you have that you are not cognizant of, that may have impact on your relationship with other people and the way you communicate with other people and how you're interpreted. So if anybody's ever heard of or haven't of the DISC method and the DISC assessment, this is a way that you get a little bit more context on where your strengths and weaknesses are. And I actually coach this and do workshops on this because it helps not only individuals, but teams understand how much more they can get out of their team. I like to use the term yield, right? We talk about yield in material science, but I'm talking about yield in being able to get the juice out of the talent that you have at your disposal in a team. So you can see the four things there, the D, I, S, and C abbreviated, and then you can see here what those mean. And everybody's sort of a combination of all four of these things. And as you become more literate in this, you'll see that some people that are very task focused, like the ones that you see on the left, those attributes on the left, they derive their trust of you differently than the ones on the right. So those people that are people focused, the ones in the influential and steady side of the equation, those are the ones that actually earn their rapport and their trust, okay, by the relationship, by the interaction with them as people, okay? And that is a different path than the ones on the left, the dominant and compliant, who are really looking for competence. They are looking for strength. They are looking for these kinds of things that are not anything about a relationship, because really it's, if you get the job done, then I trust you, then I'll go to you. You're my go-to person, all that kind of stuff. And then the ones on the left, it's about, do I like you? Right? And so you'll find some are a combination of both, but the idea is to make sure that you are aware enough of how to earn that rapport so that you can fit within any of those cultures, regardless of who the leader might be. So you kind of, like I said, we kind of have to be mutts. We kind of have to understand and be diverse in the way that we're able to adapt to different styles and to be able to read styles. So I teach folks today on how to read those styles and how to leverage intuition in a way that will allow them to be much, much more effective as employees, but also as leaders. So we're going to show a quick video. And this video is actually going to illustrate what it means to kind of get to common ground. And it's kind of funny. And if you can look at it in your context, or you can look at it in the context of how some of the folks in a company that you might be part of will actually try to relate to you, and how you kind of got to let that in, because a lot of them do build their relationships by having some common ground, having some rapport. And you can't just talk about the Gator game last weekend. I mean, that's going to be one way you connect depending on where they're from. So you could have an LSU, for crying out loud. Anyway, so we'll leave that alone. So watch Mary.
Hey, Mary, got some more reports from procurement for you to process. So we remind you office space, huh? The movie? TPS reports? Because you're too young for that, huh?
Well, I was still in diapers when you were getting back into diapers.
This old geezer could probably help you with those. You know all the codes by heart. Let me know. LMK.
Sure, if I need help,
I do indeed. Hey, Mary, I wonder if you could help me with something. Minecraft.
Listen, Gary, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm not 12 and I have reports to process.
I'm just trying to get through to a friend.
Get through to a friend? That's a song lyric.
Yeah, 20-pound sledge. They were in town last week,
Yeah, I was there. Wait, you were...
Oldest guy in the mosh pit.
Oh my gosh, you're a legend.
Try to tell him that to my grandkids.
So to say that people can connect on all kinds of different levels, right? And this was one where they connected, but it was what needed to happen. It was kind of a spark to at least have a better collaborative relationship, in that they really could help each other. And that was a great illustration of that. So common ground is actually one of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership that you'll hear about when I recommend some reading a little later in this. But it's important to leverage some of these resources and help and put in context their value for where you're going from here. All right. And the other thing we talk about is connecting and being able to connect to people. And we talked about that through the way that we build rapport, the way we derive trust. So I want to talk a little bit about the connecting principles and influence with different types of folks and different types of leaders. And you've seen this already in the journey that you took in the UF mechanical and aero process, which was, if anything, it galvanizes our character. I don't know about you, but it certainly did mine. And it gave me even more gumption and more perseverance to go through what I was going to go through after. So when you look at this, you look at these kind of people between high achievers and low achievers, high achievers really do care about the people. Okay. And sometimes, this is just to be honest, sometimes these people have to fake it. And I don't mean fake it, but because they're really being disingenuous. I mean, they have to get out of their comfort zone. I'm coaching somebody right now who is a pure task-oriented person. They don't really, and I use this term to a 3-star admiral who's like this, they don't really like people. People suck the energy out of them. Okay. And so they have to overcome that in order to be good leaders and in order to lead an organization that's not all like them. So same kind of thing here. High achievers look at their subordinates, and I would say, or their superiors, with a lot of optimism. They believe the best in their people. They believe in the best in the people around them, because that has a spark all its own. And then you've got low achievers that distrust, mostly because they're insecure and they feel threatened. And this is the other story about some people. If you come in guns a-blazing into an organization and you're ready to conquer the world, and you should be, but there are people you got to recognize that will be sort of headwinds in your way because of the fact that they feel threatened by that. So this is all about building that awareness. And high achievers actually seek advice from those under them. Imagine that. And how good do you feel when somebody that's senior to you comes in and asks for your advice? Most of us feel pretty good about that, and good leaders do that. Low achievers don't want to seek advice because they don't want to understand where their gaps are. All right. The other thing, obviously, and you know this, is to actively listen. And actively listen doesn't mean listening to the words. Some of you might have been through some training where you understand how communication actually happens. And if you could see me and you could see me moving my hands and moving around like I move right now, you would understand the difference between just the words that you're hearing and the intonations you're hearing, but the ability to connect through expressions and so forth. So let's talk about leadership, and we're going to be about 10 more minutes, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So kind of a lightning round here, but 7 factors of leadership here. You know, character, people have to know that you are who you are, right? And they need to know that what you see is what you get, all right? Because they will, and it is, obviously a very difficult thing when they feel like you're trying to be somebody you aren't. As a matter of fact, I used to say to the organizations that I was responsible for, and the last one had 1,200 people in it. And of 1,200 people, I would say, look, transparency breeds credibility. Seniority in an organization does not equate to superiority as a person. And leadership is a servant activity. So I would say those 3 things all the time so I could penetrate into the culture of the organization that's what we stood for. So when you look at relationships, you surround yourself with the right people. Our mothers have been telling us that, and fathers, since we were growing up. All right. Know the facts yourself. Do your homework. I don't want to say homework because that's probably threatening right now, but you're glad to be rid of it for those of you that graduated. And congrats to you that did. A little bit more energy, morale, timing, momentum. You know how you feel matters. Sometimes in engineering, you have people that are wired more in that task side, and you're going to have to stretch a little bit. And there are some great tools out there, including the DISC assessment and some of the other tools and some of the other books I'm going to recommend that'll help you understand how to stretch in that direction to be more effective in what you do, not only professionally, but personally. And you can see the rest there. So your ability, and you're going to be, can you actually be a good coach of somebody? So when I was at UF, we were all sitting around the table trying to figure out how to solve problems, a bunch of us together, and a lot of us are still in contact with each other some 30, what is it? I don't know. I guess it's 26 years later. So 36 years later, my gosh. So we've got a lot of folks that are still in touch with each other because we went through this gauntlet together. Okay. So 5 phases of leadership, number 1 being the lowest, and then we're going to talk about the 5 levels of leadership a little bit later that'll really give you some understanding. So, you find a lot of people that are walking around, I don't know what I don't know. And we all have elements of that where there are things that we just don't know what we don't know. And then you start to get a little bit more humble, and you know that you need to know, right? And then you know what you don't know, and you know it's a big thing, and it's a lot of volume, and you've got to do what you can to grow and become more aware. So that's when you start to get there, right? And then and you grow, and it starts to show. And Maxwell does some fun stuff with words, but it does start to show. And so it's amazing how much things can become more clear to you when you start this process, okay? It takes some courage to start this process because you first of all have to admit that there's things you don't know. And sometimes that's really hard for people. And I'm not talking about easy things to say you don't know, like I don't know this particular theorem, or I don't know this, not tangible things, intangible things about yourself, about how you come across, about all of those sorts of things, which you learn again through some of the DISC and other stuff. So what kind of process? So the one thing that it's talking about here is, and I recommend, and you'll see at the end of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. One of those, the first law actually is the law of the lid. Okay, and the law of the lid means that you can go no further than your ability to lead, and an organization can go no further than its leader's ability to lead. And they used the McDonald's example of the McDonald's brothers, who really did not have a vision and a leadership acumen to scale their business. So Ray Kroc, who had more of that, not necessarily that he did it in a way that is, sort of comports with good character, but he had more ability, and he actually grew that to what you see today. So there's tons of stories about how people have grown organizations, teams, and themselves because they've had a better leadership acumen. So these are the kinds of things that break down into lifting that lid a little higher. Okay, taking inventory of yourself, reading the right books, being exposed to the right environments so that you can actually get better. I tell my kids who are all college age and a little bit older, I say, look, who are you surrounding yourself with that is stretching you in directions that are very uncomfortable? And if you have the courage to do that, you'll get on a train that'll make you a lot more aware and a lot more effective. So I want to take a quick look at the 5 levels of leadership. And so many people obey this position 1, and that is where they derive their leadership currency, if you will, right? So this is how they spend their juice with you to learn or to influence you and to make you do what they want to do. Only because I'm the boss, no questions. It's positional leadership, right? Meaning that they only derive their currency as a result of having their nameplate on the door that says, I'm your boss. 2, they start to move up the ladder. They actually understand relationships, like we talked a little bit earlier. They believe in you and they trust you based on the fact that they recognize that you actually have some interest in them. All right. And then they get into production. We're saying not only what you've done for them, but what you've done for the organization. And they start to buy into that. And they say, wow, he's got the whole picture, or he or she's got the whole picture in mind. You know, we want to follow this person because of the fact that they have a sense of where we're going. Then 4th, the level of reproduction. And that means that not only are you caring about the people that you are, and I always say people you are responsible for, because leadership is a servant activity. I never say people I'm in charge of, because to me, that's basically level 1. Okay, so when you look at level 4 is where they realize you're committed to developing these leaders, and you're committed to the growth, not only of the organization for like profit and loss, but you're committed to their growth as people. And when you're committed to their growth as people, they buy into you as a leader on a much different level. In this case, level 4, the level of reproduction. And then finally at 5, you know, it's about your personhood. What do you represent? Your values, what you've done that's larger than life. So really cool illustration of the ladder of leaders. And here's some of the reading recommendations that I have for you. I know a lot of them say Maxwell, but we're talking about leadership, and John Maxwell has written about 79 books on leadership in many, many languages across the world. So his communication style has resonated with so many. And so that's why you see books. But the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I will tell you, my first, with the 1,200 people that I had, my first thing was to invest holistically into them. And when it came to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that was the basic blocking and tackling to help people take inventory of their life, their self, their trajectory, and get a little bit better organized around that. So it's a really, really good read, and I highly recommend it. Just remember that somebody that thinks they're leading with no one following is just taking a walk. Okay? And you can say you're a leader. People can say they're a leader, but you will see people in your profession, whichever that is, that you will be able to assess their leadership acumen. You will be able to assess that leadership level, and you will be able to find people in your position that are better leaders because you'll know what one looks like. Okay? And you can develop the relationships with those people, and you can seek mentorship from those people. So this is about equipping you. This is about equipping you for that next chapter. And with that, since it's 12:29, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve for some questions, and I'll go on the video. It's an absolutely awesome opportunity to share with you today, and I hope you got something from it.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm hopeful that a lot of the students who are tuning in now, today, and in the future are are going to get really engaged and excited about this. It's especially enthusiastic given all the, COVID situation. So we're going to now take questions from our audience. So if you wish, if you're watching live, you're welcome to post your question to the right in the chat box on YouTube. And I see we already have the first question come in. And it's from Ryan Hurley. He says, "Hey Roto, I worked under you at NAWCTSD, and I apologize, I don't know the acronym, so maybe you can
That's
share.
okay.
What advice do you have for those who pursue a career within the federal government via DoD, NASA, or other organizations?"
So Ryan, it's good to see your name, and thanks for reaching out. So when it comes to pursuing a career within the federal government, whether that be DoD, NASA, or any of the other agencies, there's the mechanics of that with respect to going to USA jobs and finding requisitions that you can fill, and those are job announcements. But I would also submit that before you ever choose to apply for anything like that, that you start to do some of your own research on the organization. You start to try to find, whether it be through LinkedIn or something like that, relationships that you can develop so that you can actually inquire more about those organizations. Obviously, Ryan, if it was NOC-TSD, I've got people that reach out to me on LinkedIn and such to ask about certain things within NOC-TSD as much as they do other places within NAVAIR and other places on the DoD side. So I actually coach a lot of folks as they're coming out of the Navy because they're taking off the cloth, but at the same time, now they're trying to figure out, okay, where do I fit in Rubik's Cube after the fact? So, but I'm happy to help with that. And I think that the biggest advice is to find that mentor. And I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I would not have had the career that I have if it hadn't been for mentorship and people in my life. So I suggest that you can reach out. They have a great mentorship program at NOC-TSD. They have a great on-ramp with some of their folks there. And if anybody needs help with that, I'm happy to help.
That's a great insight. We appreciate that. Thank you. Our next question is from Mary Church, and she writes, "You mentioned mentorship. How important is it to have a mentor? What are some of the benefits of having one?"
Well, first thing I would say is I have more than one, but having a mentor in your various roles is a sign, one, that you have enough humility to recognize that you need one, and you're a sponge to listening to that experience that's in advance of your own. And so I've had mentors in my nonprofit work because I'm Pluto as just coming out of the Navy, had mentors in that domain as a nonprofit leader, had mentors in the business domain as I didn't know about running a business. I've had mentors in, having a great marriage, whether it be through your church or whatever. I always say that, finding, and I told sailors this as they were really young, I said, look, you got to understand that reaching out for help and mentorship is a strength, not a weakness. Sometimes they're bred in this, get her done kind of, philosophy, and they feel like they have to take this thing all on their own, and they think they ask for help, it's weak. It's not weak, it's strong. And that's what people need to get around their head, because it actually makes them better, not only because they became humble enough to ask for the help, but the actual help that they get. So I've always think, and I've talked to Mary about this, the balance of confidence and humility are huge. And both of them are important. And in the world of naval aviation, if you don't do both of them, then, one way or the other, if you're out of balance, it could get you hurt.
Yeah, thanks for that insight. Our next question is from Professor Scott Banks. He writes, "Thank you, Roto. You inspire us all. Could you please talk about your reasons and vision for standing up the Leadership Development Endowment in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering with Dr. Iftu? You put your money where your mouth is."
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Banks. And what the idea was, the passion that you heard me share over the last 30 minutes or so about ensuring that you are equipped to succeed in this next chapter. Peter Nicholas and I, who sponsored this, are very, very passionate about and have seen clearly in our transitions to industry how important it is to develop beyond the degree. And the people that are in VP roles and director roles and leading organizations and responsible for larger organizations and with more responsibility and more compensation are because of the fact that they have a more full sea bag. They've got the understanding of people. They've got the understanding of self. They actually can grow beyond just the academics, and that's just crucial. And so we've been talking about this for years, Peter and I. And finally, over the last couple of years, we were able to put it together. So we're grateful to the department and grateful for the opportunity to add value as much as we can add value to the student body and to equip them to be more successful.
That's a great response, and I appreciate the question from Professor Banks. That was wonderful. We have a similar question from a Mr. Mike General, who's an adjunct lecturer in our department. And he writes, "Hey, Bill, one of the things that I speak to in my classes is that leadership is not always positional. Can you please talk to any of these issues and times where you lead from a following position?" I think the question is, how do you lead as someone like new in an organization, especially for students entering one for the first time?
No question. So, and thank you, classmate, Mike General. I'll tell you, you're absolutely right. It is not always positional. And as you saw earlier, as the 5 levels of leadership, that's the lowest form of leadership there is, right? And so leadership is much more than that. And so the thing I would say, Mike, with respect to leading up, as we would say, and Maxwell wrote a good book called The 360 Leader that actually talks about leading up and leading adjacent. But it really, if you look at those 5 levels of leadership, if you start to make some of those investments on the higher rungs of the ladder in yourself and the way you represent yourself and those sorts of things, then believe it or not, in my experience, and this was my commanding officer, I was an executive officer, which is the second in command, and the commanding officer was above me. That's the way it works. I'm eventually going to be the commanding officer in the way that this works. Okay, so I know I'm going to get into that job, but he and I were very, very different leadership styles. He was a position leader. And so I was, hitting the lid, right, of the organization based on the fact that we had that. So it took me building, and not intentionally, and I'm not trying to undermine, because you've got to respect that leader. You've got to respect their position. But at the same time, you have to reveal that you have some things to bring to them that are valuable to them. And you can even, I would Jedi it, I mean, not being at all disingenuous, but I would say, I'm hearing from X, Y, and Z that they think we're doing X, and they interpreted this as Y. And start to be that facilitator between the rank and file and the leader to be able to influence their perception of their delivery to the command. So in a way, you kind of become that facilitator to try to mature the awareness of the leader, of the actual leader.
Thank you. Our next question is from Michael Kennedy, and he writes, "Hey, Bill, I was wondering if you have any advice about leveraging technical skills and moving from more technical roles to being in more of a management or systems engineering role. Do you have any advice?"
Sure. I mean, as far as what I mean, so leveraging technical skills and moving from more technical roles to being in a management systems engineering side. So one of the things I talk about with the CBAG, okay, the people that are in management, whether that be program management or any of that, and even the systems engineering side, they have a diversity of pedigree. Okay, so the pedigree of that individual is not just about the beeps and squeaks of where they've worked, right? They have expanded their aperture based on their ability to relate, their ability to translate, and their ability to connect. So when you think about getting out of a sort of a technician sort of pillar and moving it to one that's got a broader aperture of responsibility and opportunity. It's really about growing that piece of you so that you are actually more equipped to lead people and to make people around you better, and they see you as that. You start to develop a personal brand within a company that makes you a more attractive leader to them. So that's the best way I can answer it. I don't know whether, Steve, you've seen the same, but that's the best way I can answer it.
I've seen similar things too, and I think my thoughts are encompassed by your response. That's really insightful, and I think a lot of these lessons are you can understand when they're coming, but wow, when it really affects you and your profession, it's then you really learn them. Our next question comes from Mina Thiagaraja, and she writes, "Good afternoon, Mr. Roto. Can you please comment on what steps or tools can faculty and the department undertake to promote leadership within student organizations?" What a great question.
Yeah, I think it's important to put, and I thank you for the question, Mina. It's important for the faculty, and Scott and I have talked, Dr. Banks and I have talked a little bit about this. It's important to offer context around the education we provide our students, right? So I know when we go through, we've got to do the blocking and tackling of getting the curriculum done, and we've got to know how to meet objectives that are very, very critical in the achievement of the degree. Whether it's seminars, and Dr. Banks and I and Dr. Hahn and I, before he left, had talked about that, whether it's seminars or whether it's some other avenue that would then need to be promoted by faculty as sort of this rounding out of your education. Still, the faculty, since they have such a connection to the students because they see them more frequently, have a unique role to play in, if anything, promoting the fact that there's more to this in context that you probably ought to be exploring, and here's how to do that. That's the best way I'd answer it. And the student organizations have a role to play there. I'm sorry, it was the last part of your question. So the student organizations, again, we're about equipping them as well. And with the endowment that we stood up, it obviously has, and Dr. Banks and Mary and those guys would know more about this, but it has some ability to make some investments where they make sense to enable the student organizations to carry this message and be more educated in how to going forward.
Thanks for all that insight. That's great. I just have a couple questions, if it's okay myself. I'm so interested I get an opportunity to talk to someone like you, which is rare. I hope if you ever visit campus and I'm there, of course, just knock on my door. I'd love to meet you. A lot of our students, they really struggle in their first design experience because they're placed in a team, and sometimes they don't know the other students, and the team dynamics and how they work in a team is just critical. And all the best design projects from their senior design work have something about their team dynamics. And is there something about your time at University of Florida, and maybe from all your experience now, that you can give insight to our current students about working on their first design team where there's a lot of stress and pressure to create a great design project?
Well, the stress and pressure, easy for me to say, stress and pressure is certainly something that changes in a way the styles of some of the people when they get under pressure, and we do some DIS stuff that talks about where they revert to under pressure, right? And so that even more complicates the team dynamics, and it's really hard. But I tell you, for anything, it's when you come into a team, it's really important to understand how everybody ticks. So it's almost like there ought to be some listening in the beginning, and maybe some background, something that connects those folks in the team, something that helps align their visions on what it is they're really trying to accomplish. There's got to be the investment up front to sort of galvanize the expectations and all of that with the team, because you'll find a lot of folks, and these are the D's on the DIS side, let's go, step out, and it's more about the task. Well, if you're focused only on the task and you're forgetting the people, then as a team, you're not going to function harmonically at all. And so that's the thing that I would recommend. And it's out of people's comfort zone, especially those that are more task oriented and want to get it done, but have the patience to sit there, talk through this, build some relationships, allow people that are quiet to speak their piece. And if you have to say, what do you think? Say, what do you think? Because there are people that sit in those teams that have some brilliant ideas that won't speak because that's not the way they're wired in a dominated environment by a bunch of Ds. So trust me, take the time to breathe, listen to the talent, and make sure you've captured everybody.
That's a great response. I hope students who are watching can take that advice to heart and try it out in their own experiences in teams now and in the future. We have one more question from the audience, and maybe we'll answer that one, and maybe just one fun, quick question, we'll wrap it up. So my colleague, Dr. Bruce Carroll, he's interesting from the teaching perspective, and he writes, as teachers, we want students to follow us. Roto, can you please comment on how to use leadership principles to be an effective teacher?
So earlier we talked about connection, and Maxwell wrote a book called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And so what we're really talking about is connection and getting leverage and traction with the student body to be more effective and to be able to pour into them the way that you feel you want to, right? And I found, and one of the things that I said of those three things was transparency breeded credibility. So I had to, in my journey to connect with people that were far different than me, was to be more transparent about myself and maybe say some things that I'm very vulnerable about, maybe share something that I don't do well, maybe something that connects us a little bit, that I'm sort of humanizing myself. Right? Because I know when I went through, first of all, we were struggling for a lot of different reasons, but when I went through, it was hard to connect with some other professors. We had Dr. Bernie Ledden, so he had the Eagles up on his wall because Bernie Ledden's Bernie Ledden, and so we had Bernie Ledden, and it was easy to connect with him because we had a common ground. So somehow there has to be something in there that you can find when you look at those students and you see all of their backgrounds and all of that, that you do something that gives them the more human side of Dr. Carroll and help you connect to them. And then they'll follow. See, that's where you get the juice to lead.
Actually, we just had a few more questions, so hopefully we have another maybe 10 minutes if it's okay with you.
Sounds good.
University of Florida, we always try and prioritize our students and put them forward. And of course, here's a student question. So I'll put that first. And Mr. Andrew Jensen, who I'm noted as an amazing and awesome MAE student, he writes, "Hi, Mr. Roto. I'm wondering if you can talk about how to maintain strong leadership in difficult situations where it might be easier to fall back into old or worse leadership habits." Good question.
Andrew, that's a great question, and at the same time, I don't want to say it's an easy answer. It's a simple answer. Okay, because some things that are simple are not easy. Now, what I mean by simple is that it is about environment. It is about the continued awareness and seeking feedback and having those. So when I was in command, I had spies, and I call them spies not in a pejorative way. I call them spies because they were sources of information that they would tell me the brutal truth, and I needed the brutal truth to make sure that I avoided the pitfalls of leading in a way that was not necessarily my intent, and having people sort of, I don't want to say rise up against me, but creating antibodies in the culture. And so for me, that my best advice would be to say, look, those situations can frustrate you. Those situations can make you just want to be done with it, and it tries your patience, all of that. But you've got to look at the long ball, because you can go in and fix whilst breaking other things. And so if you have the big picture in mind when you're talking to whoever or trying to fix something or have some challenge that is episodic. It's this just an episode, right? So if it's across the whole organization, then you got bigger problems. But this is the idea. So have a bigger picture in mind, and we're all aviation oriented. Be a trim tab leader, right? You're not 100% aileron out to here. You're a trim tab leader, okay? You're helping things right themselves like a trim tab does, but you are not necessarily going in there guns a-blazing. So that's my best answer.
Oh, that's a great analogy about trim tab leader. I have a feeling that we're going to get some emails from new students asking about this analogy. What's a trim tab? So this is great. Yeah, we have another question from Professor Banks, and he writes, do you see fundamental differences in leadership and career advancement in the military and the private enterprise, or are the uniforms and titles simply different?
No, it's a great question, Scott. Thanks. So there is a transfer function between the cloth, meaning military cloth, and the civilian workforce, whether that be in the government or whether that be in industry. That transfer function varies as a function of how much you derive your identity from being in the military. Now, granted, it is an important attribute of your identity, but there are some that make it 90% of their identity. And for them, it's a harder transition, as you can imagine. For those that derive their value from a more holistic sort of view of themselves, their transition is easier. Mine, I knew 4 years before I was getting out of the Navy that I was getting out of the Navy. I knew that I needed to grow my aperture of awareness and understanding and translation and all this other kind of stuff. So that's that function. So, but as far as career advancement in the military, there is a little bit different structure when it comes to that. Obviously, some of it is tenure based, but you still have to earn your way to that next rung on the ladder. And so you're forced out of the Navy at certain years of being in, depending on whether or not you made rank. So you could be let go of the Navy, and people say you're working for the government, it's all good. No, it's not. I mean, you could be out at 8 years, you could be out at 10, you could be out at 20, you could be out at 30 or beyond. So you have to earn your way into those pipelines to be promoted. So that part of it's different. I'll tell you, some of the worst organizations are the ones that promote only through tenure and technical acumen and not in their ability to lead people. And so there are so many under or unequipped people in leadership positions in industry. That's why I say, you as youngins, you learn leadership, trust me, you are already ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of the folks there. So, because they typically don't focus on that as much, and they focus on promotions from a different viewpoint.
Yeah, thanks for that response. I mean, I get the feeling that a career, or even, the beginning of a career, can really lead to so many other opportunities, especially when one serves our country through the military or even civil service or contracting roles in the government. That's really wonderful. I think that's really all the time we have today for questions. So we'll be closing up questions. And, usually in a person seminar, we give a big applause. So I'll just, applause myself. And so thanks for this today. I learned a lot, and I think all of our students and faculty and staff and whole university community will too. Of course, these videos are posted on our YouTube website, which is linked from our department website. So at this time, we're bringing our presentation to a close, and we've had wonderful discussions. And I really want to thank you for attending, of course, and all the students who are asking great questions and staying engaged. And we will be launching another episode of the MAE speaker series next week. So tune in, and we'll be on the lookout for that. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great weekend.